LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the July 4th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Happy Independence Day to those of my viewers in the United States who celebrate the 4th of July. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips that I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. It should be a really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all. And my main topic, and the topic of almost all the clips here, will be even stronger evidence Trump committed federal crimes. And I will also be committing some legal analysis based on my background as a criminal defense attorney about why I think there is even stronger evidence based on these stunning allegations or revelations from former aide to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Cassidy Hutchinson. She testified last Tuesday, and that was one of the main topics covered by all the big five corporate outlets. And I'll show you their news summaries, and I'll talk about a couple federal statutes that I think we got a lot more evidence that Trump violated and committed these crimes. But before I get to that, I usually like to start with political comedy. This isn't really funny, what I'm starting off with here. But I don't know, it is kind of a joke. This is on CBS News' Face the Nation. They had on an expert on maternal mortality and like all the problems with women and children that the pro-life people don't want to take care of. And one of the screenshots they put up there, one of the informational screenshots I thought was kind of a joke, was this one here. It's the countries with no national paid leave policy. You see the United States there on the list with the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, is that even how you pronounce that? Palau, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga. Which of these things is not like the others? Which of these things doesn't belong? That's what I learned on Sesame Street. That's kind of a joke that the United States is the only country without a national paid leave policy except for those other very small countries. And maybe that has something to do with, the low investment we put into mothers and children, despite now being so pro-life as a country, is reflected in this screenshot that was kind of shocking. Not a joke at all, but that was a pretty serious thing that you can see discussed over on Face the Nation that's not on my main topic, but I just wanted to start off pointing those things out. And I'm going to get to the news summaries that mostly cover the revelations in the Cassidy Hutchinson January 6th committee hearings this week. But one thing, I'm going to show you a federal crime, a statute that I discussed earlier when I was covering the January 6th committee hearings, the statute for seditious conspiracy. Because when I titled my video here that there is even stronger evidence that Trump committed federal crimes, well, I talked about this statute 18 U.S. Code Section 2384 in the past, seditious conspiracy, and I put a link down in the video description where you can look at it yourself. But it's if two or more people conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof. Now, I emphasized one word when I was reading that. That is the word force, because that's one of the elements of seditious conspiracy, is you have to have conspired to use force. And that was something that came out in the January 6th committee hearings, this Cassidy Hutchinson testimony this week, that really put Donald Trump a lot closer to being liable, being for criminally charged for seditious conspiracy, because she had this one quote, and you'll see it in most of the news summaries, that like wrapped it all up together, like, these are my people, when he wanted to have his people let through the magnetometers without having to be screened for weapons. It shows, he knew they had weapons, but, these are my people, they have weapons, they're not going to hurt me, let them in, and then I want them to march to Congress. I mean, Cassidy Hutchinson's quote on that, it was like wrapped it all up together so neatly. It was almost, I almost thought it was like, that almost strained credulity at how well she wrapped that up. The use of force as to take over the Capitol or to defy governmental authority, for Trump to be guilty of seditious conspiracy, he has to know that they had weapons. And that he was sending people with weapons to use force on the Capitol, and this was the strongest evidence so far. And you'll see that in most of these news summaries, starting with the longest one. This week, Chuck Todd had the longest best package, which is that pre-recorded video that he shows after his live introduction, that I will talk with you a little more. I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
A good Sunday morning, and I hope you are enjoying this July 4th weekend. But even as the country celebrates the 246th anniversary of our independence, the lines that separate us seem to be growing bolder and brighter by the day. Abortion rights advocates versus abortion opponents. Americans eager to limit the availability of guns versus Second Amendment enthusiasts. Climate change versus drill baby drill. Blue versus red, left versus right. And no single person personifies our disunity or aggravates our wounds more than Donald Trump. On Tuesday, in the unscheduled fifth hearing of the January 6th committee, we heard shocking testimony that has been compared to Watergate's John Dean. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson described nothing less than a violent coup attempt urged on by a president who was more active participant than passive observer. Cassidy testified that Mr. Trump knew the mob was armed, wanted to go to the Capitol with them, even agreed that Vice President Mike Pence deserved to be hanged, and was in danger of being declared unfit to serve by a majority of his cabinet.
Knives, guns in the form of pistols and rifles, bear spray, body armor, spears.
I got 3 men walking down the street in fatigue while carrying AR-15.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here.
President Trump was aware that a number of the individuals in the crowd had weapons and were wearing body armor. And here's what President Trump instructed the crowd to do.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong.
And joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California.
And I will have a clip of Zoe Lofgren. I'll have a clip of Adam Kinzinger and a clip of Adam Schiff, all committee members who were on the shows. And let's see, Adam Kinzinger, Adam Schiff, Zoe Lofgren. Who am I missing? There's like Adam Schiff, Adam Kinzinger, Zoe Lofgren, and Liz Cheney. That's right. That's the fourth person. I'll have clips from all four of those committee members coming up. because there was one on each of the 4 actual news shows. One of the shows, one of the big five corporate outlets, did not have a member of the January 6th committee on. Can you guess which one it was? It was Fox News, of course. Fox News Sunday does its best to avoid it. They actually had some discussion of the January 6th committee hearing on the Fox News Sunday program, which was like better than last week. It was like briefly mentioned in the teaser before the news summary, so I can't say they didn't put it anywhere in the first half of the program, but then they didn't mention it until like minute 29. And you'll see it's not included anywhere in the Fox News Sunday news summary. Oh, by the way, Adam Kinzinger has this huge burn on South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem that I'm going to show you coming up, because I'm going to show you 2 Republicans also, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota and then Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, both responding sort of to the January 6th committee evidence in a way that makes me think that there's still a long way to go to convince, the Trump cultists. Are we ever going to convince the Trump cultists that Trump committed federal crimes? Well, I guess we can talk about that later, but next, I'm going to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary that makes absolutely no mention of the January 6th committee hearings. This is the news summary at the beginning of the program, and also is fairly biased for reasons I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington, and happy Independence Day weekend. The president back on U.S. soil days after meeting with European allies to discuss ongoing support for Ukraine. The president hinting the steep gas prices we are seeing this holiday could be here to stay as Russia's war rages on. And he's promising action to preserve women's access to abortion as state bans go into effect. In a moment, National Security Council Strategic Communications Coordinator John Kirby joins me to discuss the administration's plans to increase the global oil supply. But first, let's turn to Alex Hoff live at the White House this morning with how President Biden is balancing foreign and domestic priorities. Alex?
Well, Mike, according to the president, they are one in the same, reiterating his stance that Russia is to blame for the current cost of living crisis and warning Americans not to grow weary.
President Biden did not arrive home with a remedy for gas prices, but left the G7 and NATO leadership meetings with a plan to cap the price of Russian oil exports and a fast-tracked invitation for Sweden and Finland to join the alliance Vladimir Putin sought to stifle.
He's getting exactly what he did not want. He wanted the Finlandization of NATO. He got the NATOization of Finland.
Additional military assistance was also pledged to allies in the continued fight to preserve Ukraine. Discussions also centered around potential security threats posed by China.
We rallied our alliances to meet both the direct threats of Russia poses to Europe and the systemic challenges that China poses to a rules-based world order.
The president also used the world stage to admonish the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. From the White House Friday, President Biden met virtually with 9 Democratic governors who vowed to preserve access to abortions.
I share the public outrage at this extremist court that's committed to moving America backwards with fewer rights, less autonomy.
While the president said he supports a carve-out to the Senate filibuster in order to codify Roe v. Wade, he conceded that Democrats likely do not have enough votes right now to change Senate procedure. After the meeting, President Biden took off to Camp David, joining a pre-pandemic rate of Americans who traveled this holiday weekend. Those who did so by air faced thousands of delays and cancellations.
On the legislative side, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said this week that Republicans will not support a bipartisan innovation bill if Democrats continue to pursue a slimmed-down version of their social spending package. Mike?
Alex Hoff reporting from the White House. Alex, many thanks. Joining us now, National Security Council Strategic...
And I'm not going to have the John Kirby clip. Like I said, I'm going to give you a Tate Reeves clip coming up. When Alexandria Hoff there at the end there said on the legislative side, I'm like, oh, they're actually going to mention the January 6th committee hearings in the news summary at the beginning of the program. But no, of course, they did, like I said, in that teaser part before Mike Emanuel, the guest host this week for Fox News Sunday, before he says hello again and starts the news summary, there was like a brief clip about the January 6th committee hearings. Nothing about like Trump committing crimes, just like stunning, explosive, or testimony this week, but not the content. And in just a couple minutes, I'll show you a news summary they did a little later in the program with Mike Emanuel and David Spunt, which gives a little more information, like the most information that Fox News viewers are going to get about these hearings. Except certain days they did cover them. They actually did show the Cassidy Hutchinson testimony live on Fox News. I think the whole day, or maybe they took off when Outnumbered was on. But anyway. I want to get to the rest of the news summaries. I think you saw, and they focused on like the problems that Biden isn't dealing with, and gas prices, and he's trying to connect foreign and domestic policy. There was all sorts of little digs at the Biden administration in there. That's what you get when you go to Fox News, because if you've read Gabriel Sherman's book, The Loudest Voice in the Room, you know that Roger Ailes created Fox News to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which is what it seems to be and still is these days. And anyway, let's compare that with the ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. It's Martha Raddatz doing the introduction this week. Over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. The Supreme Court has now ended its most consequential term in decades, with rulings on abortion, guns, religion, and climate change shaping the American landscape in the image of the conservative majority. Democrats did get a win on immigration with a decision allowing President Biden to end the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy. The court concluded the term with the swearing in of Ketanji Brown Jackon, the first black female justice filling the seat of now retired Justice Stephen Breyer. While ripples from the shift in the court spread across the country, the January 6th hearing sent shockwaves through Washington on Tuesday as former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified in vivid detail about former President Trump's actions that day. Testifying under oath, she told the committee that Trump planned to join his supporters at the Capitol that day, and that even after learning some of them were armed, he urged them to march to Capitol Hill. Hutchinson testified, told Trump was adamant about heading to the Capitol, grabbing the steering wheel when the Secret Service refused to drive him there. Her account raises the stakes and potential legal jeopardy for Trump and his allies. We will talk to legal experts in a moment, but first, a This Week exclusive. Chief Washington correspondent and co-anchor Jonathan Karl sat down with committee vice chair Liz Cheney for her first interview since the hearings began. John pressed her about those extraordinary allegations and whether the committee is making the case to prosecute former President Trump.
And I will definitely have that clip there where Liz Cheney talks about the crimes against President Trump, and that was or the crimes committed by President Trump up to and including on January 6th. And that was definitely a lot better than the Fox News Sunday news summary that included nothing about that. So I sandwiched in between two good news summaries, the fake news summary from the fake news channel of Fox News, and I've got two much more brief news summaries. CNN State of the Union covers some of these same topics. I think it focuses a little more on immigration because of their first guest, but I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is ready for some fireworks of the non-political variety. Happy 4th of July weekend. As friends gather to celebrate America's birthday at parades and cookouts over this holiday break, the food they're eating and the drives they are taking are more expensive than last year. And there are signs that Americans of different political stripes are growing more divided after a series of Supreme Court reversals on environmental regulations, guns, and abortion. Add to the mix the ongoing fight over former President Trump's big election lie as Americans learn shocking new details about how far Trump was willing to go to stay in power. The former president has told associates he is eager to launch his 2024 campaign as early as this month. For his part, President Biden is focused on the midterm elections this fall. He met virtually with Democratic governors Friday on abortion rights, but as Republican states move quickly to further restrict the ability of women and girls to terminate a pregnancy, life and how it's defined depends more and more on where you live. Here with me now is a staunch abortion rights opponent, Republican Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, where abortion...
Oh, sorry, I got the last two clips mixed up. It's actually the Face the Nation one coming up that focuses on immigration because they have the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alexander Mayorkas, on... do I have... I think I have his right name, his first name correct. But anyway, I thought that was a good news summary, and then I want to finish up the news summaries with the shortest one, Face the Nation. Now, they don't mention the January 6th committee hearings in the brief news summary at the beginning, but it's like less than 30 seconds long. It is in the teaser before, just like on Fox News Sunday, but unlike Fox News Sunday, later they have Adam Schiff on to talk about it extensively, so I'm not going to give Face the Nation the same or attribute the same bias to Face the Nation for not talking about the January 6th committee hearing in their very brief, under 30-second news summary at the beginning of the program that I think goes a little towards immigration, like I said before the last one, by mistake, because of their first guest over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Thank you for joining us this holiday weekend. We begin today with immigration and the win for the Biden administration last week in the Supreme Court, that of the ending of President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. To discuss that and more, we want to welcome Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to this broadcast. Mr. Secretary, good morning to you. Happy early.
So yeah, that was the shortest of the news summaries. And it didn't mention January 6th, and it talked about immigration, I think, because they had the Homeland Security Secretary on. And anyway, I think you can judge the 5 news summaries based on the way I've juxtaposed them all and the criticism and commentary I've already given you. The one thing I want to add to the Fox News Sunday news summary, where they didn't mention January 6th at all, later in the program, this is like after they had 2 guests on, including Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, who I'll show you in the clip after next, where they like barely questioned him on the evidence against that, you know, the evidence that Trump committed like serious federal felonies. Didn't really mention that, questioning Tate Reeves, but it did come up a little later before their roundtable discussion. This next clip is like the best explanation of what's going on in the January 6th committee hearings this week that I've seen on Fox News. They don't talk about it very much on Fox News. The one thing is that they don't really focus on how Trump knew about the use of force. You know, I talked about how in 18 U.S. Code Section 2384, the seditious conspiracy statute, which some people said it's hard to prove that. I think they were thinking about treason. Treason is very hard to prove. Seditious conspiracy, a lot of the Oath Keepers have been charged with this. A lot of the Proud Boys have been charged with this. I think the Proud Boys have even already pled guilty to this. And the one thing that you need to like loop in Trump into this seditious conspiracy charge is that he knowingly knew about the use of force. And you, like I said, you saw that clip from in multiple news summaries of Cassidy Hutchinson saying, you know, let them through the mags. I know they have weapons. They're my people. They're not going to hurt me. I want them to march on the Capitol, basically. That it's like all wrapped up into one quote. Well, that quote is in this Fox News Sunday news summary, but then they like focus in on did he grab the wheel to try to like and attack the Secret Service agents, which is, of course, the part that they really focused on Fox News. They like talk about how they're Secret Service agents who, through like anonymous sources, are claiming it's not true. But is that what they're going to say under oath? Because Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath, and that story was like a second-hand hearsay story that isn't even really important to whether Trump is guilty of crimes. And at one point, you'll hear David Spud says that she admits it's secondhand. Well, I mean, it's not like she ever said it wasn't a secondhand hearsay story, and it's not the most important thing. I mean, everybody agrees that he knew that the people in the crowd had weapons, serious weapons, and he still wanted them to march on the Capitol. That's important for seditious conspiracy. And then, you know, he wanted to go up to the Capitol himself, which shows more of his like desire to be personally involved in the obstruction of an official proceeding, which is a different crime I'm not really going to talk about today, but I've talked about extensively in previous live streams. And anyway, think about that when watching this good for Fox News, but not really that good news summary of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony that was like more than halfway through the Fox News Sunday program yesterday over here.
We heard stunning allegations this week about the actions of former President Trump and his senior staff both before and during the Capitol riot on January 6th. Former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath that the president wanted to join his supporters at the Capitol. Now there's some pushback about certain claims she made. David Spunt reports on the revelations, the fallout, and what happens now.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
As millions watched this week, a former White House aide, Cassidy Hutchinson, described a president desperate to hang on to power on January 6, 2021. Hutchinson told lawmakers then President Donald Trump knew some in the crowd were armed.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here.
According to Hutchinson, a top Secret Service official at the White House, Tony Ornato, told her Trump demanded to go to the Capitol after his speech, and Hutchinson said she was told the president lashed out when he was told no.
Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel, and when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
The former president continues to deny the story, attacking Hutchinson's credibility in multiple social media posts. Ornato was not in the vehicle, meaning Hutchinson's story is secondhand, which she does not refute. A Secret Service spokesman told Fox News the committee did not reach out to the agency in the days leading up to Hutchinson's testimony, but lawmakers on the committee are defending her credibility.
Her testimony represented the cumulative information that the committee had received, but we were simply of the mind that the public needed to know about all of this.
Hutchinson's attorney says she stands by her testimony. The committee is in discussions with the Secret Service to allow Ornato and Engel to testify. The committee also subpoenaed former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, though it's not clear if he'll play ball. Mike?
David Spunt reporting from Washington. David, many thanks. And it's time now for our Sunday.
And I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, but they also said that they were like trying to get Tony Ornato to testify. Well, apparently he already testified. You'll see that in some of the newsmaker clips I'm going to show you coming up. This guy who went from the Secret Service to being like the deputy chief of staff for operations for Donald Trump, which already looks kind of bad because Secret Service agents are supposed to be apolitical, and then he got this political appointment, and he's already testified, but he has a loss of memory about some of the things that Cassidy Hutchinson testified about. And of course, he's a Secret Service agent, so he's a police officer, and based on my experience as a criminal defense attorney, a lot of times police officers, instead of coming up with the facts, they all get together and decide, what's the bullshit story we're all going to stick to, and it's going to include I don't remember anything, Trump doing anything aggressive when he was told that he couldn't go up to the Capitol. And so they all have this bullshit story they're sticking to, and then Cassidy Hutchinson went and told the truth, and now they have to see. I mean, that's what I think is the most likely thing going on here. So that was something wrong with the Fox News Sunday news summary, in addition to the things I showed before the clip. And then the only time before that, earlier in the program, other than that teaser at the very beginning where they brought up the January 6th committee hearings, is when they had Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves on, mostly to talk about abortion and his, pro-life victory, since it was the Mississippi law that got upheld by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. But here you'll see Mike Emanuel ask him about the January 6th committee hearings, just in a really minor way. Do you still support Trump despite what you've heard in the January 6th committee hearings? Never saying the specific evidence that Trump is guilty of federal crimes and tried to overthrow our democracy. None of that from Fox News and Mike Emanuel. but I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
A political question, sir. You've supported President Trump. In 2024, he's talking about potentially running again. Would you support him in 2024, or is there something that you have heard in the January 6th special committee that may give you pause or may make you want somebody who can carry out his policies but with a fresh voice?
Well, like most Americans, I haven't spent very much time paying any attention to the January 6th hearings. I did have the occasion of spending some time with President Trump just in the last couple of weeks. He was in Mississippi. I was pleased to welcome him to our state. There's no doubt in my mind that were it not for his conservative justices, and by the way, the campaign in 2016 was largely run on who had the ability to appoint Supreme Court justices, and so therefore I believe that President Trump's legacy is going to be creating a Supreme Court that focuses on the Constitution. Now, he's going to have to decide whether or not he's going to run for president. That's a decision that only he can make, and then we'll decide at that point. But he certainly did a fantastic job as president, and the fact of the matter is, when you talk to Americans and people like in small towns across Mississippi, the things like inflation are what people are worried about. They're not worried about this trial that's being had by only one side in Washington, D.C. They're focused on the issues that matter to them in their pocketbooks, and Joe Biden's inflation is really hurting everyday Mississippians.
Governor, thank you for talking with us. Always good to see you.
So yeah, that was the end. No follow-up, no cross-examination, no like specifics about all the things that Trump did that make him ineligible to ever be president again. Just like, did you hear anything at the January 6th committee hearings that would change your mind? And just letting him give all the Republican talking points. So yeah, those are all the Fox News clips and the Fox News bias clips. But I think actually Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union did a much better job cross-examining the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who you saw was on a couple programs last week. She's out promoting her book, and she did not do a great job answering the questions from Dana Bash. And I could criticize her, but after I show this clip, I'm going to show like a really sick burn from Adam Kinzinger, her Republican colleague, they were both in Congress together, and he does not like the answer you're about to see that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Okay, I want to ask you about some new information we learned this week about the attack on the U.S. Capitol where you used to serve. A former top aide to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Cassidy Hutchinson, said President Trump knew the mob was armed and still sent them to the Capitol. Listen to what she said.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here.
This is firsthand testimony under oath from a tried and true Republican. Does it alarm you?
Well, what alarms me is the way that this hearing's been conducted. This is not at all like the hearings that were conducted when I was a member of Congress. This was a one-sided conversation with one, set of witnesses that are reporting hearsay in many situations, not facts. So it's been difficult to really believe everything that she has said. She says that she's telling the truth, but much of it was hearsay, and much of it other people have refuted now. So
Governor, what
there's
I
an
just
agenda
played
behind this hearing.
Was her firsthand. She said that she heard President Trump say that. So it's not
But her
hearsay.
credibility was damaged when she talked about hearsay, and then other people that she referenced said that it absolutely wasn't true. And that's what's difficult about these hearings. It feels to be more of a show and more of an agenda than an actual, true, objective hearing that's uncovering facts.
Just for the
I would prefer that we continue. When I go to the gas stations, when I'm working in South Dakota and I'm traveling to businesses and talking to families, their number one concern this 4th of July weekend is going to be gas prices and food for their families.
I'm going to ask you about that, Governor, but just for the record, she testified under oath to what she did, and we haven't heard anyone dispute that yet under oath. I want to ask even more broadly, do you believe that President Trump bears any responsibility for what happened on January 6th?
I think January 6th was a horrific day in our history. I never want to see that happen again. I think moving forward that we've got to have a time in our country where we all start talking to each other again, where we start having conversations. We get much better policy. I talk about this in my book, Dana, where I talk about the fact that we become a country so offended by each other that we quit talking to each other. And it's hurting public debate that we have to have different perspectives around the table to have an open conversation, and we'll end up with much better policy, better laws, if we can take the emotion and the anger and the bitterness out of our conversation and really talk about what is best for our country and where we can agree and move forward.
The question is whether President Trump bears any responsibility.
I think we all need to examine this country and where we're going, and I'm hopeful that people will look to our state. Our state has done incredible things. I think the country is desperate for some hope right now. The best weekend to focus on that is this weekend, where we celebrate our freedoms, our independence, and really look forward with an optimistic attitude. I think we've got a bright future ahead of us as long as we continue to represent our people.
Real quick, because I wanted to get to the economy. Former President Trump may announce that he's running as soon as this month. If he does, A, will you support him? And B, would you like to be his running mate?
Well, if he runs, I will support him. I've said that many times. I think his policies were good for our country.
Would you like to be his running mate?
I think that there's a lot of people out there who would like to be his running mate.
If he asked you, would
So
you
I'm
say
focused
yes?
on getting reelected too. I don't operate in that hypothetical either.
Okay.
I would be shocked if he asked. And right now, I'm just so focused on South Dakota. We're doing great things, and we've got a lot more to do the next 4 years.
In your new book, you write that one of the
And she asks her about the book. She's on a book tour, and everyone asks her about the book. That's, I mean, at least she's making herself available to all this hostile press questioning because she's on a book tour. A couple programs last week, and then this one. Earlier in that interview, she refused to say that that 10-year-old girl in Indiana who was raped and pregnant and couldn't get an abortion because she was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, and in Ohio couldn't get an abortion and had to go to Indiana. She wouldn't say that that girl should be able to get an abortion. And I put a link down under sources to the entire program. You can watch the entire interview. But I thought Dana Bash did a good job of getting her on the record for not being willing to say that Trump had any responsibility for January 6th or not having any problems with the evidence we saw this week, the even stronger evidence that Trump committed crimes, even willing to still be his running mate, which does she want to be his running mate, or is she actually running for president? Well, you'll see, Adam, I could go on criticizing her, but you really want to see the sick burn, the person who actually knows her, having been a member of Congress with her, part of the same Republican caucus, and she's changed. She's changed from I don't know. It's hard to believe that she's changed, but according to Adam Kinzinger, she's changed, and not in a good way, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Congressman, I want to get your reaction to what you just heard from the South Dakota Governor, Kristi Noem, particularly on January 6th, talking about the fact that she didn't think specifically that the former president had any blame. She said everybody has blame, but she also put into question the credibility of Cassidy Hutchinson. Your response?
Yeah, I mean, I'm blown away. This is not, I served with Kristi Noem in the House, and it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is not the Kristi Noem I served with. Kristi Noem I served with, was conservative, dedicated to truth. I at the time would have put her country above her political career at any moment. It is clear, look, Dana, it is clear she is running for president or vice president. She's scared to death of the base. And for her to call into question, a 26-year-old patriot who stood in front of the committee alone and told the truth, and then to avoid saying that Donald Trump bore even an ounce of responsibility for January 6th, I get amazed still every day by what some of my colleagues do. This is one of the biggest ones. She used to be something very different.
I don't need to tell.
I just hate to see this Republican on Republican verbal violence like that. Republican lives matter. And I don't know, Kristi Noem's political life, at least, apparently depends on her allegiance to Trump and Trump world, because she could not say one thing against it, and she's all in on the Trump big lie and the Trump overthrow of democracy, and Adam Kinzinger is definitely calling her out. What was that? Invasion of the body snatchers. That was I don't know. Did I exaggerate when I called it a sick burn? I don't think I did. But I want to show what Adam Kinzinger actually said about the evidence from Cassidy Hutchinson, and also about whether there were new witnesses coming forward, and whether they were hearing new things. And that was also on CNN State of the Union, and I want to show you that clip and talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Congressman, let's turn to the explosive testimony this week from former Trump White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson. Here's what she said then Deputy Chief of Staff Tony Ornato told her happened inside the presidential car on January 6th.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president. Take me up to the Capitol now." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel.
So this is the part that Governor Noem was referring to, and some Secret Service sources are disputing the account. Others say, though, it tracks with what they heard. So the question is, Trump allies are trying to use this to discredit all of her testimony. Why did the committee put this out there, ask her about this, that she heard secondhand without first obtaining corroborating evidence?
Well, I'm not going to say what we do or don't have in terms of corroboration, but let me say this. What she said is this is what she heard. At no point did she say she was in the Beast with the president and saw this happen. Now, you guys have done a good job of reporting Secret Service sources saying they heard the same story. What you're seeing now, and this is typical for Trump world, that nobody has argued that the president didn't want to go to the Capitol. Nobody has argued that he didn't know there were guns. They're trying to argue, did he really grab for the Beast? And that's where Tony Ornato will have to come in and tell us more about his position on that.
Will he do that?
There's information I can't say yet, but we certainly would say that Cassidy Hutchinson has testified under oath. We find her credible. And anybody that wants to cast disparagements on that was firsthand present should come and also testify under oath, and not through anonymous sources, quote unquote, and not potentially being an anonymous source.
Congressman, since Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, have new witnesses come forward to want to speak up?
Yes. Again, I don't want to get into who or any of those details, but and it's not even just Cassidy. By the way, she's been inspiring for a lot of people. This happens every day. Every day we get new people that come forward and say, hey, I didn't think maybe this piece of a story that I knew was important, but now that you guys are, I do see this plays in here. But yeah, I mean, look, she is going to go down in history as, people can forget the names of every one of us on the committee. They will not forget her name. And by the way, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to be out in the public spotlight, but she has a commitment to truth that somebody like Kristi Noem, for instance, and most people in our party would actually benefit to take just a 10% ounce of.
Real quick, because we're out of time, will we hear from witnesses that you did not know about, with stories you did not hear because of the hearing so far?
Yes. There will be way more information, and stay tuned.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
So that was definitely vouching for the credibility of Cassidy Hutchinson versus this Tony Ornato guy, and you'll hear even more about that from Zoe Lofgren in the final clip, where I showed Chuck Todd trying to he got criticized for never doing good follow-up questions, and he sticks to the this really stupid follow-up question. That'll be the final clip I'm going to show you. That's 3 clips from now. I only have 3 clips left. But the next clip is the Liz Cheney clip from her interview with Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. where she talks about this thing about criminal referrals. Everyone seems to be asking about that, or they talk about it way too much on the political programs that I watch, the cable news programs, whether Congress is going to give a criminal referral. Now, Congress usually just gives criminal referrals when someone like lies to Congress, like something happens in Congress that is a crime, and they like point it out to the Justice Department. And even in that case, you know, the Justice Department decides who to charge with crimes independent of anything Congress says. So, and Liz Cheney points that out in this answer, but she also points out what the real stakes are, because some people say it's like too much of a threat to democracy for a current administration to charge the president from a past administration, especially one who may be their opponent in the upcoming election. It makes us, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens in like banana republics or whatever, where they, you know, they criminalize their political opponents. You see that happening down in Brazil recently, Lula and that whole thing. And anyway, I'm not going to go off on that whole tangent, but I think Liz Cheney points out that threat pretty clearly in her discussion with Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
You've been cleared since really January 6th itself that he bears responsibility. Have these hearings demonstrated that Donald Trump needs to be prosecuted?
Ultimately, the Justice Department will decide that. I think we may well, as a committee, have a view on that. And if you just think about it from the perspective of what kind of man knows that a mob is armed and sends the mob to attack the Capitol, and further incites that mob when his own vice president is under threat, when the Congress is under threat. It's very chilling. And I think certainly we will, continue to present to the American people what we found.
So the committee will or will not make a criminal referral?
We'll make a decision as a committee about it.
So it's possible there will be a criminal referral, which
yes.
would be effectively the committee saying that he should be prosecuted, and this is the evidence that we've uncovered.
The Justice Department doesn't have to wait for the committee to make a criminal referral, and there could be more than one criminal referral.
Are you worried about what that means for the country to see a former president prosecuted, a former president who is a likely candidate, who may in fact be running for president against Biden? It would be Biden's Justice Department that would be prosecuting.
I have greater concern about what it would mean if people weren't held accountable for what's happened here. I think it's a much graver constitutional threat if a president can engage in these kinds of activities and, the majority of the president's party looks away, or we as a country decide, we're not actually going to take our constitutional obligation seriously. I think that's a much more serious threat.
Yeah, I've been watching the live comments along the way, and I've been seeing some people saying they've been watching my videos for a long time. And actually, it's July. I started this YouTube channel in July 2006. So we're coming up on the 16th anniversary of my YouTube channel this month. And during many of those years, I wouldn't have really considered I would be doing videos where I would be saying things like, Liz Cheney is absolutely right. Liz Cheney has got an incredibly important point right there. But I guess this is the year when that commentary makes sense. To agree, there aren't many things I agree with Liz Cheney on, but I do believe that the threat to democracy is much greater by not holding Trump and his, cadre of, what do you call them? They were like the normals and the crazies, or the terrible, incompetent group of people trying to overthrow U.S. democracy. If you don't hold them accountable, the consequences are a lot worse than what might be viewed as a political prosecution by the dwindling number of people who can't see the facts that Trump lost the 2020 election, that he conspired to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, that he violated a number of federal laws, seditious conspiracy. I've talked about 18 U.S.C. 1512 sub C sub 2, which is obstructing an official proceeding. But 18 U.S.C. 1512 also has to do with witness tampering, and apparently there's witness tampering going on. You saw that talked about in some of these things, and I think that's going to be in some of the clips coming up. There are all sorts of federal crimes, and so you saw Adam Kinzinger talking about them. You saw Liz Cheney talking about them in a way that I had to agree with Liz Cheney, which is not normal for me to do, as I was saying. And now I'm going to show you California Democrat member of Congress Adam Schiff. Both comment. I put this clip here because he comments both on what Kinzinger said and what Cheney said, and then he also explains in greater detail the even stronger evidence that Trump has committed federal crimes that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
The vice chair of the committee, Liz Cheney, said not prosecuting former President Trump over the attack on the Capitol would be a much graver constitutional threat to the country than the political difficulties involved with bringing charges. She said this in an ABC interview. She also said there are possible criminal referrals, not just one, but multiple. Do you agree?
I do. For 4 years, the Justice Department took the position that you can't indict a sitting president. If the department were now to take the position that you can't investigate or indict a former president, then a president becomes above the law. That's a very dangerous idea that the founders would have never subscribed to. Even more dangerous, I think, in the case of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is someone who has shown when he's not held accountable, he goes on to commit worse and worse abuses of power. So I agree with Judge Carter in California. I think there was evidence that the former president engaged in multiple violations of the law, and that should be investigated.
But there will be a political calculus to this as well. This is an incredibly divided country right now. Millions of people voted for the former president and still believe wrongly that he won the election. Prosecuting him, isn't there a very high risk to that?
It's certainly not a step to be taken lightly at all. At the same time, immunizing a former president who has engaged in wrongdoing, I would agree with our vice chair, I think is more dangerous than anything else. And the decision not to move forward with an investigation or not to move forward with the prosecution because of someone's political status or political influence or because they have a following, to me, that is a far more dangerous thing to our Constitution than following the evidence wherever it leads, including when it leads to a former president.
Your colleague, Adam Kinzinger, was on another program this morning and said new witnesses have come forward since Cassidy Hutchinson testified. How many? How significant? Is there more new information that requires more hearings?
I think there's certainly more information that is coming forward. In terms of whether that will materialize into particular witnesses on this topic or that topic, we're going to wait and see, but we are following additional leads. I think those leads will lead to a new testimony. It's part of the reason we wanted her to come before the public is we were hoping it would generate others stepping forward, seeing her courage would inspire them to show the same kind of courage.
Has she inspired the former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, to take up the request to speak to him again?
I hope so. We're in discussions with Mr. Cipollone's counsel. I'm hopeful that we can work out bringing him in for testimony. He clearly has information about concerns about criminal violations, concerns about the president going to the Capitol that day, concerns about the chief of staff having blood on his hands if they didn't do more to stop that violent attack on the Capitol. Hard to imagine someone more at the center of things. And I hope that he'll demonstrate the same courage we saw Cassidy Hutchinson display.
Who is attempting to intimidate the witnesses, as Congresswoman Cheney said? And how significant are the security threats against Hutchinson?
I have to imagine the security threats are very pronounced. Certainly our members are feeling them and hearing them. I have to expect the same is true of her since the former president and his enablers are going after her. And we want to make sure that she is safe. We have several concerns. We have the concern over safety of our witnesses. We have concern over people who are trying to influence or intimidate witnesses.
Who's doing that?
You know, I can't comment on specifics, but
you know.
We wanted to let the country know, and anyone in the former president's world know, that if they seek to intimidate witnesses, they will be referred for prosecution. And we hope the Justice Department will move against them. But we also have a concern about the fact that some of these witnesses are sharing lawyers, that essentially, and this gets to some of the testimony revealed during the Cassidy Hutchinson hearing, that they're reviewing transcripts, that they're essentially coordinating potentially their stories, or that witnesses feel they've got Big Brother watching when they sit in for their depositions.
So on that, I want to ask you, that one of the things that Cassidy Hutchinson described having been told by another individual was about this tussle in the Beast, the president's vehicle, where he allegedly lunged for the wheel, demanding to be taken to the Capitol. The committee's already interviewed Tony Ornato, the White House operations director, and Secret Service agent Robert Engel. Was this the first time you heard about that incident? Did they back that up or contradict that testimony?
I can't go into the specifics of the prior testimony, but I can say I think we'd be interested in having them come back, and others that can shed light on this. But the most important thing is there doesn't appear to be any dispute over the fact the president was furious that he could not accompany this armed mob to the Capitol. That seems to be undisputed. And the fact that the president knew that the mob was armed, wanted the magnetometers down so they could take their arms to the Capitol, that doesn't seem to be disputed by anyone except Donald Trump. And he has, as we've seen in the past, no credibility.
And Adam Schiff is right to stress that last part where he knew that the crowd was armed and he still wanted to send them to the Capitol, because that is an important element, as I've been talking about, in 18 U.S. Code Section 2384. So, because you have to know about the use of force in your conspiracy in order to be guilty of that, and Trump seems to know that when he sent the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who've been already charged with seditious conspiracy to the Capitol, that they were going to use force. He knew they were armed, so Adam Schiff was good to, I really understand why that's something he emphasized. At the end of that clip, Margaret Brennan kind of perseverated a little bit too much on the allegation that Trump went for the wheel and the whole, but did talk about Tony Ornato a little bit. I think the biggest or the January 6th committee member who did the most to undermine the credibility of Tony Ornato, that former Secret Service agent who then became a Trump political appointee, being the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations under Mark Meadows, was actually Zoe Lofgren in this next clip. And I'm going to show you that clip, but first, this is the clip I promised you, the final newsmaker clip where Chuck Todd, you know, he's been criticized for not doing well on follow-up questions, most famously at the White House Correspondents' Dinner by Trevor Noah in his routine. But it's something I've talked about on my live streams for many years, that Chuck Todd, you know, he has good producers, he's well prepared, he asks really good first questions, but he's not really good at the follow-up question. And you'll hear in this clip with Zoe Lofgren, he seems like he's trying to make up for that by asking this follow-up question over and over again that's actually totally irrelevant. It's about whether Tony Ornato and the Secret Service were under oath when they previously testified and didn't have a memory or testified in a way that doesn't match up with what Cassidy Hutchinson testified to. And this is where we get into this federal statute, 18 U.S. Code Section 1001, statements or entries generally, which basically says that it is if you make a false representation to like any branch of the federal government, it's a felony. And you don't have to be under oath. It doesn't matter. And so like lying to Congress is a felony under this federal statute. But it doesn't matter if they like make you stand up and put up your hand and swear an oath. It's kind of like theater. They do that in these committee hearings a lot, but it doesn't matter because it's still a felony to lie to Congress or lie to an FBI agent or various parts of the federal government. You don't have to be under oath, but Chuck Todd kind of perseverates on that question in this last newsmaker clip. Representative Zoe Lofgren, who I think does, like I said, does the best to undermine the Secret Service agent credibility, and Chuck Todd is like almost oblivious. In the final newsmaker clip, I will talk with you about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Let me start with your simple reaction to particularly the former president and a couple of people around them disputing certain parts of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. And I know not the larger part, but some of the specific details. What do you make of that pushback, Congresswoman?
Well, we always expected Trump world to try and discredit her, and they are not disappointing us in that regard. I thought her testimony was credible. She has nothing to gain by stepping forward and telling the truth, and Trump world has everything to lose by the truth. So they are doing their best to try and attack her, to discredit her. You know, I am not surprised by this effort, but it is not the right thing to do.
Can you describe the efforts the committee makes to corroborate some of the charges Ms. Hutchinson made before she appeared? Did you contact Secret Service, some of these other entities?
Well, we had interviewed Mr. Ornato several times. His memory does not appear to be as precise as hers. We certainly would welcome them to come back if they wish to do that. But her overall testimony that the then president, wanted to go to the Capitol is consistent with other testimony that we have received. Certainly, her testimony that she directly overheard President Trump saying that he didn't care if they had weapons, if the crowd had weapons, that they were not going to hurt him, and that they could march to the Capitol with their weapons after the speech. That was new and stunning, really.
You know, there's always cameras on the presidential motorcade. Have you gotten any footage? It's possible there is footage of the alleged incident in the SUV. Have you guys subpoenaed that footage, whether it's from news organizations or the Secret Service?
Well, we'll look at everything, but I think it's important to note Ms. Hutchinson was relating a story that Mr. Ornato told to her. She wasn't in the vehicle. She didn't see it. She was relating what he told her. Mm-hmm. The important thing is that no one is disputing that Trump wanted to go to the Capitol. He even said so in his speech. Right. There's a lot of evidence that when he went back to the White House, he still wanted to go to the Capitol, and was certainly well aware of the violence that was going on.
You made a diplomatic response about Mr. Ornato, saying that he seems to not have a precise memory. Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy told me earlier this week that something similar, he did not have clear of memories at that time. Adam Kinzinger went further and he said that Mr. Ornato likes to lie. Let me ask you this. Has Mr. Ornato testified under oath in any of these interviews that you've had with him?
It's important to note that it's if you lie to Congress, it's a crime whether or not you're under oath.
But was he under oath?
It's a crime to lie to Congress when you come in for an interview, whether you come in for a deposition. So I'll say this. Mr. Ornato was a political appointee of President Trump.
Right.
It raised a lot of eyebrows at the time that, unlike all prior Secret Service agents protecting the president, he was then also appointed to be deputy assistant to the president. And so he was involved in clearing the square so the president could hold up a Bible in front of the church. I mean, he was involved in all of that. He's part of Trump world.
No, I understand that. You've been hesitant to confirm or deny whether he's under oath, and I understand what you're saying. It is still a crime to lie to Congress. Is it that you're not sure he was under oath or he was not under oath?
I believe he was under oath. But certainly if he wants to come back and clarify his prior information, he will also be under oath. I think it's a mistake to focus on whether or not he was lying to Ms. Hutchinson when he relayed that story. The fact is, the president knew his crowd was armed.
Right.
We heard the Metropolitan Police describing seeing assault weapons on this crowd. He wanted to go down to the Capitol with them. He said that in his speech. And we have a lot of evidence that that was true even when he returned to the White House.
So yeah, I thought that was really a great explanation from Zoe Lofgren. I don't know why Chuck Todd perseverated on that whole was he under oath or not under oath, because as I pointed out before I showed that clip, under 18 U.S. Code Section 1001, like Zoe Lofgren kept trying to say, it doesn't matter whether he was under oath, it's still a felony. I also wanted to thank my Super Chat contributors for the show before I finish up here. Let me see if I can import that. Here we go. So thanks Lulu Girl and Joanna Funkhauser for those Super Chat contributions. I really appreciate that. And I read your comment there, Lulu Girl, about getting a new kitten and the naming, but also being appreciative of the work I'm doing. And I appreciate the people who just show up for the live streams and give me supportive comments, but I also appreciate the financial support. I've also put links down in the right below the video in the video description for PayPal donations directly, and also to become a monthly contributor on Patreon, a patron. I actually got a couple new patrons this month and one direct contribution through PayPal. If you give as little as $5, I will send you both this weatherproof vinyl #LiberalViewer sticker and also this ACLU Constitution, which I have to send a few of those out this week because I got 2 new patrons and 1 direct PayPal contributor. So I'm not going to name them because I didn't get permission to say their names publicly, but thank you for that. And thank you to those. Oh, and I just got another Super Chat contribution from Matthew, so thank you for that as well. And anyway, that is the end of the program. I will be back next Monday for another LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up. I've been thinking about, I did a couple live streams on the first couple January 6th committee hearings, and then I wasn't able to do the last few, and I don't know if I'm going to do a catch-up before the next ones happen, or whether I should do that, or you can let me know what you think down in the comments. And anyway, maybe I'll have a chance to do that this week, or if not, I'll be back next Monday for the next Monday Media Mix-Up, and which I'll keep doing those at least through the November midterms. And anyway, until I have another reason to upload a video, or until next Monday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.